Hey guys, so welcome to another episode of Ethix, and this is going to be an ethics educational video where I'm going to talk to you about KISS, talking about why I use KISS. We're going to talk about what KISS is for the people that are new to my channel and don't know what I'm talking about. We're also going to talk about the V2 setup. So this is my current drone, and I'm using the KISS V2 flight controller and the KISS 32 amp ESCs. And we're going to go into detail on what my PIDs are now and also what my rates are. Which, not a lot has changed since the V1 setup, but I have increased my PIDs a little bit because the V2 is definitely more capable and can handle it. So first of all, we're going to talk about what KISS is for the people that don't know what KISS is. So Flyduino.net, which is a German company out of Hamburg, Germany, they make KISS ESCs, and KISS is kind of like means keep it super simple, but in a non-politically correct term, it means keep it simple stupid. And their entire thing, Flyduino, Arduino, Fly, their whole thing is about making hardware that makes your drones fly better or your quadcopters fly extremely in high precision with the highest technology and highest capable electronics that are available at this point in time for the consumer market at least. So anyways, KISS started out with the KISS 18 amp and KISS 12 amp ESCs, which were night and day difference over the time when they came out. This was almost 4 years ago when those ESCs came out, and there was literally nothing on the market that could touch them. And I found them through forums and just stumbling across them online, trying to find the best of the best, because I've always been about trying to fly or use the best of the best, regardless of what industry it is. If I can afford it, I'm going to buy it, and by no means am I rich. But this particular hobby is not a very expensive one, so buying the best of the best for me was not that big of a deal, because when you're talking about modifying cars or having girlfriends, those are expensive hobbies. This, not so much. So anyways, I would always look for the best of the best, and I stumbled across KISS 18 amps, and at the time the form factor was tiny. They were about this size. They could handle 18 amps on 4S, and it was like the best, oh my god, a moment in my life. I ordered many of them, even though they were like $20 something, $23 or something for this little tiny piece of electronics, and most competing ESCs on the market at the time were like $10 to $12. So you're talking about almost double the price for an ESC that's half the size. What can it really pack into half that size that's going to give you that extra double the money you've just spent on it? And literally the first time I plugged it in and flew it, it was the most eye-opening experience I had ever experienced with flying mini quads. And I hadn't been flying that long, but it was extremely noticeable to me. And from that moment on, I was hooked on KISS products. And there was nothing else that could touch them on the market for years after that. So after the KISS 18 amp, the KISS 30 amp came out, then the KISS 24 amp. That's when they went to a 32-bit ESC, which was capable of a lot higher capacity as far as not necessarily amp draw, but more technology, including D-Shot, which was something that basically turned the protocol between the ESCs and the flight controllers being able to talk from analog to a digital signal, which was has a lot more headroom and has a lot more room to grow, and is a lot safer, to be frank. And then now there is the KISS V2 stuff, which is a KISS 32 amp ESC, which is a 32-bit ESC too, if that isn't confusing enough. And then the KISS V2 flight controller, which the V1 was a F3 flight controller, the V2 is an F7 flight controller. So when you're talking about processing power, you talk about F3, F4. F4 is like a high processing power for a flight controller, and now the KISS V2 has an F7 on it. Yes, the F7 chip is actually a lot more expensive. A lot of R&D that goes into making an F7 chip work is expensive. So yes, the V2 is going to be a lot more expensive than the V1, and also in relation going to be more expensive than other flight controllers that are on the market that are based off of stuff that's already been existing. And F3 flight controllers and F4 flight controllers, those processing chips are cheaper, so they're going to be cheaper to make. So that kind of explains why the V2 stuff is more expensive. There have been a lot of people that have complained about the price of the V2 stuff. Is it really worth the difference? Is it worth the price? Is there such like a huge dramatic change between the V2 of the V1? Like, why would I pay that much? So that's kind of what I'm going to get into today. So KISS, in a nutshell, has always been the spearhead as far as this industry and this hobby is concerned for technology advancements when you're talking about hardware, whether that be flight controllers or ESCs. And that's kind of why I linked with them in the beginning, as far as why I stuck with them as a company, not as a sponsored pilot. I didn't get sponsored by them until I specifically asked for it right around the time that the KISS V1 flight controller and the KISS 24 amps came out. So it had been almost 2 years that I was flying these things, paying for them out of my pocket, and using them and just falling in love with the capabilities and the flight characteristics of these pieces of hardware. So you know, you can't say, oh, you just with them because you're sponsored by them. No, literally, I flew them, and all the things that are on my aircraft, I had flown from the beginning, not being sponsored, because I consider them to be the best of the best in the industry, and that has not changed to this day. If something better comes out, and I think it's better, and it feels better to me, it works better for me, I'm going to use it, regardless of sponsorships or whatever. I specifically write in my sponsorship deals that if I find something, if I don't like what you're doing, if you change your policies or something, you change a product and it's not good, then, you know, I have the right to say bye and find something that works better for me, specifically because I am all about flying the best of the best and using what I think, in my personal opinion, is the best for me and for my needs. So KISS has always been the best for me. And not only has there been a lot of advancements in other ESCs and other protocols and other companies, I mean, Betaflight, for example, and KISS, I would argue and say that yes, they both fly equally as good, but it's like comparing apples and oranges. One flies one way and one flies another way. One is definitely more suited for out-of-the-box flyers. So Betaflight, if you want to just take Betaflight, put it onto a quad, buy a flight controller that's off the shelf. There are hundreds of Betaflight flight controllers, clones, whether or not they're clones or not, it doesn't really matter because they're all pretty much going to do the same thing. You put Betaflight on it and you put it in a quad, and pretty much stock PIDs and stock rates are going to fly really well, and you're probably not going to know the difference. If you fly a V2 KISS, yeah, it's a little bit more cost of entry. It's a little bit more time, like saying, oh, well, you know, I got to solder this and I got to solder this here. But once you get it set up and you figure out the ecosystem, you figure out how it works, it's not nearly as complicated as Betaflight. A lot less tinkering, I would say, and more fiddly. You have to fiddle with the KISS stuff to make sure it flies the way that you want it to fly, where Betaflight stuff just works out of the box. But at the end of the day, if you want it to fly and you want it to be as precise or get it close to the way KISS flies, you're going to be tinkering for days. It's going to be... This just fell off the wall. I'm talking so loud I'm blowing freaking foam off the wall. But yeah, so with Betaflight, you're going to talk about tinkering. It's like Sony color palette versus Canon color palette. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, Canon, usually you can take the footage right out of the camera and it looks great. Sony always looks like people are sick. The colors are green. You're tinkering. You're constantly trying to color grade afterwards, trying to get it to look as good as Canon. Usually people are trying to match Sony footage with Canon footage. And yes, there will be someone out there that says, oh, Sony colors are way better than Canon. Yes, on their newer cameras, there have been some improvements. But for the most part, Sony has always tried to mimic Canon colors. And yeah, for video anyway. So it's like Betaflight is Sony. Canon is... like the Mac, the Apple, the KISS, Canon, that is what I'm categorizing as KISS. Canon, Apple, KISS. Sony, PC, Betaflight. If you want to tinker, if you want to be able to do everything, you want to put LiDAR on your mini quad, Betaflight. Cool. I don't need LiDAR. I don't give a shit about that. I want my quad to feel amazing and fly amazing and work well for me when I need it to work consistently, and I also want it to be over-engineered, and I also want to support a company that I know is spearheading the industry and causing new things to happen and pushing the technology further. So, with that being said, that is why I fly KISS, and that is why I don't fly Betaflight, although I will say that Betaflight and Raceflight and whatever else out there probably flies really well, and I have flown them all, and I know they fly well. They don't feel like KISS, and how I can put that into a nutshell really quickly so I don't spend any more time on it. KISS feels tight and loose at the same time. Betaflight feels tight all the time. Raceflight feels very filtered and tight. I like loose and tight at the same time. Loose as in the center stick feel on KISS is going to be a little bit more organic feeling, a little bit more natural, and also the quad feels loose, like it's tight, but when you throw the quad, it has a little bit more of an organic arc to it. It feels a little bit different, and that's the only real way I can explain it in layman's terms. It's loose and tight at the same time. So anyways, without further ado, let's get into Mr. Steele's V2 setup and PIDs and rates. So let me start this screen recording over here, and we're good to go. I'm gonna plug in this right here so you can see this is my V2 quad. I'm gonna plug that in right there. And we are gonna open this thing up right there. Okay, cool. So we're looking at this. This is my current setup. And you'll notice, if you have any kind of experience with my previous setups, the V1 KISS stuff, you'll notice that the PIDs and stuff have not changed very much, and neither have the rates. So when you're talking about PIDs, I think my old roll P was around 4, my old pitch P was around 6, and my old yaw P was around 8. So I've increased them slightly, and that is due to the higher capacity of the processing power on the V2. It can handle a higher PID, higher PID, or pitch, or sorry, a higher proportional or a higher P without inducing oscillations. And then also the I's have slightly risen and D's have slightly gone down. Maybe pitch D has gone up a little bit. I want to talk to you about PID tuning in particular right now, because there's a lot of discrepancy on PID tuning and what feels loose and what feels tight and what causes oscillations and what doesn't cause oscillations and mid-throttle oscillations and all this stuff. So let me kind of put it into just generic layman's terms for you. There is a loose feeling quad and there is an overly tuned quad. Looser is undertuned, and tighter or overly tuned is like oscillations. So you have oscillations because it's overly tuned, or the quad feels floppy in the air because it's undertuned. Now there's a little spot in the middle, that's the sweet spot, or the golden zone, Goldilocks zone, whatever you want to call it. That's where you want to tune your quad. Now within that Goldilocks zone, there is actually more zones. You can be on the lower side, which is able to handle a little bit more wind conditions, or a little bit different as like far as altitude change. You're lower on the tight Goldilocks zone, but you're actually taking into account that you're going to be flying in a lot of different locations, and it might cause oscillations and you don't want to worry about it as much. Or you can be on the higher end of the Goldilocks zone, that's actually going to be a little bit tighter feeling, but it might be a little bit more susceptible to altitude change or humidity change, or I don't know, whatever kind of environment you're taking it to. Higher humidity, on the beach there might be wind. So you can pick where you want to tune it, as far as if you want it to be looser feeling, but you want it to be able to handle a little bit more changing of altitude or changing environments, or you want it to be tighter. And I kind of lean more towards the tighter feel. So if there was a dead center and the left side was we're still in the Goldilocks zone. The left side was a little bit looser, but it was a little bit more okay with just environmental change and being able to fly in different locations. And then a little bit beyond that was like more susceptible to vibrations and less inviting to fly in different locations, but it flies really tight and feels really good on the sticks. Then I'm going to kind of be in like the 1/3 past center point. So I'm not all the way on the highly tuned side of the Goldilocks zone, but I'm not on the lower side. I'm more on the higher tuned side, but just past center. And what that means is my quad is a little bit more susceptible to vibrations due to either really high winds, or maybe I'm flying at 9,000 feet above sea level or something, or the altitude density is equivalent to 9,000 feet above sea level, and the quad feels really underpowered, and sometimes it oscillates. Usually the higher altitude you go, the higher tuned PIDs you can have, because the air is not as thick and it doesn't cause as much like turbulence on the props and stuff. That's from my personal experience. But yeah, like I said, from generic standpoint, I'm going to be on the little bit more higher tuned side. And if I need to, which I rarely do, I can just go in and adjust my roll P down a little bit. And that will put me back towards the lower, squishier side, which can handle a little bit more oscillations. So from my personal experience, roll P is the most susceptible to oscillations. When you're talking about mid-throttle oscillations, it's usually roll P for me, and that is the one thing that if I'm going to adjust something to reduce oscillations because I'm having something oscillate, obviously if I'm not overly tuned on everything, roll P is the one that is the most susceptible. Now we're going to go over here, and I wanted to talk to you specifically because I know there are going to be a lot of people that ask about my eyes. Why are your eyes so high? Eye is basically how the quad interacts with the environment around it and whether or not it negates any incoming information, as in wind or, you know, prop wash or any kind of turbulence in the air. Basically, eye is negating that the higher it is. And what that does is when I have higher eyes, you'll see my pitch eye is at 7, and what that Y is at 0.07. Because if you've ever blipped the throttle really hard and you see the quad dip, right? If you increase your pitch eye, it will actually stop that dip from happening. So I'm on and off the throttle all the time. Like, you know, I'll pop up, stop the quad with the throttle, and when I do that, I don't want the quad to dip. I want it to be as level as possible. Yes, increasing the eye higher tunes the quad and can susceptibly make it more susceptible to vibrations, but at the same time, you're kind of taking out one evil and bringing in another, so you have to fly around all these weird nuances that you're basically dealing with these electronics in the real world. It's not an engineering feat, and you're not doing it on a computer or on a lab. You're actually taking this stuff out and using it in the real world, and that is what makes, from my experience, the good pilots versus the engineers is the fact that they can take this stuff and use it in real life. There's a lot of people that can talk about this stuff all day. There aren't a lot of people that can go out and use this stuff the way it's supposed to be used and actually make it happen, and then talk about it at the same time and talk about how they're doing it. A lot of people keep this information from you, and it's not because they don't want to keep it from you or not because they want to keep it from you. It's because there's like the pilots and the engineers, there's very few that are both. And I grew up as an engineer, and I've somehow got the artsy feel for the piloting stuff, and just from my personal experience, it is very difficult to tell you guys exactly how to tune your quad, because you're essentially tuning it and taking out one evil and bringing in another, and you have to fly around all of these nuances that you're bringing in. So when I tune a quad, I'm bringing it in and under the mindset that I'm going to tune it to where it has as little nuances as possible. And are those nuances flyable? Can I fly around those nuances? Can I fix the problems with the throttle and the sticks? Or do I need to fix it in the tuning program? So that's kind of what you're talking about when you're talking about changing numbers and why are mine so high versus someone else's, because they might have a different way of flying. They might have a nuance that they're used to. Maybe they're used to prop wash oscillations, and the only way they can get rid of that is to reduce their pitch eye a lot, but they don't mind a little bobble when they blip the throttle. So there's so many things to consider when you're talking about PID tuning. So why is there not an all-encompassing PID tuning video? That's why. It's because you're talking about dealing with digital things in the real world, and you're talking about people that, you know, you have to have a feel for it. You have to actually sit down and say, okay, is this something that am I naturally gifted at playing musical instruments or something? Yes or no? Do I need as much practice as someone else? Do I need less practice than someone else? All of that stuff is very much relatable to mini quads. So whether or not you have the natural gift to be able to like feel what this digital thing is doing in the air and then go and process that information and fix it, or fix it as much as you can on this program, then, you know, that's kind of what you're dealing with. So, and just D's are pretty much the same based on the I's. I've increased pitch D because I've increased pitch I and pitch P. And then as far as rates are concerned, I haven't really done much with the rates. I always increase RC rate and reduce rate pretty consistently. I will increase rate, or RC rate, and reduce rate. And what RC rate is, the more RC rate you have, the more linear the quad is going to feel. Rate actually has built-in expo. So even if your RC curve, which is basically, it's literally expo, if your RC curve is at 0 and you have rate, then you're gonna have expo built in because it's built into rate. Now if you just have RC rate and you have no rate and no RC curve, you have no expo whatsoever, and is literally a vertical or a 45-degree angle all the way up. So 50%, 50%, 100%, 100%. So what I want out of my quad is something that flips at around 1100, what is it? Let me see. It's around 1100 degrees per second. So, you know, 1100 degrees, and I want roll and pitch to be very similar, if not pretty much always the same. You want them to be exactly the same because you want your timing. You're basing all of your flips and rolls off of timing. This whole acro stuff is all timing and muscle memory. It has nothing to do with like, oh, his rates are faster than mine, I can't do that. No, it's muscle memory. It's timing. Every time you bump the stick, how long are you leaving it over? To how long does it take to roll the quad? How long does it take you to go back to stop the quad? Are you doing it quickly? Are you being abrupt with it? Are you stopping the quad and it's jerking? You know, you can actually tune out a lot of these bobbles by being smoother on the sticks. A lot of people don't know that, and that's why back in the day, 3 or 4 years ago, when we had the crappiest stuff ever that was barely flying, there were still people that were making it look really good, and it was because they were able to go out and fly this stuff and make it look good by taking all of those subtle things that they knew were going to happen and then tuning them out with their fingers, not going in and having this protocol take care of all of it for them. So when you're talking about RC rate, I want it to be more linear because you have more control with less expo. Yes, I have 21% expo, but my rate is actually very low. So when you're talking about expo, there's actually not a lot of expo going on, and it's very predictable. If I want to roll halfway and then start to slowly roll the rest of the way, it's actually a lot easier to do that when you have a more linear curve because you can be more precise. Where when you have a crazy jump of expo, you're actually saying, oh, well, I need to control it on this very steep curve. It's like trying to stand on a really steep hill. You can't do it. If you have a little bit more of a linear hill, you can be a little bit more precise. So anyways, that's rates and my rates in a nutshell. That's why I have it the way I do. And just for reference, you can get 1100 degrees of rotation many different ways, and you can actually take RC rate and change all these numbers and get 1100 degrees, and it's going to feel completely different than what I have here. So it's all what you're used to, and I think this is a very good starting point for a lot of people that are even seasoned in the industry or people that want to try something new, or there are new people out there that, you know, want to go out and fly a quad and have it feel organic to them. I've given my quad to many people that had completely different rates, and they find my rates to be very organic feeling and very natural. So if you want to give them a try, go ahead, pop those rates in. They're directly compatible with Betaflight. So yeah, it works all the same. And other than that, I hope you guys learned something today. We've been talking for about 22 minutes, so I hope you did learn something, and I appreciate you guys sticking around. And yeah, have a great day. And if you haven't already, check out ethix.com, ethixltd.com. We have a couple things for sale on there. You just help support us if you like the products that we use. Newbie Drone is actually going to be the Ethix seller for the United States. So if you want to buy anything Ethix or Ethix related off of the Ethix website, soon enough we will have it linked directly from the Ethix website to Newbie Drone site. And we actually have a lot of cool products coming out that are currently in production and have been in production for 6 months or so. So anyways, takes a long time to make cool shit. I'm just gonna throw that one out there. Peace, you guys. Have a good one. Oh, and for the people that stuck around, I got a little surprise for you. These are coming. New KISS products. They'll be out in a couple days.